9 weeks. 9 weeks. We've all been doing our best to stay safe, stay home. 9 weeks of self-isolation and layoffs and fear and learning how to use face masks so we can go get our groceries. Not that I'm complaining. Well, I guess I am a little. It's had plenty of challenges. But I can honestly say that I feel extremely fortunate to be among the more privileged citizens of this world for whom my life is fairly secure, my kids are cared for, and none of my loved ones have gotten sick so far. Like everyone, I think I'm holding all of that a bit loosely, knowing that things can change on a dime. But so far we're okay. To the best of my knowledge, everyone in our church is okay, and my heart goes out to every person who has had far bigger struggles than my own. It sure makes me yearn even more for a more just and equitable world. There are signs it's helping. There are signs that we have succeeded in slowing it down, preventing an overloaded healthcare system, that lives are being saved, that we're buying time for doctors and scientists to learn and to develop strategies to fight and to treat this disease. But 9 weeks in, it also is starting to look like there's no real end in sight. We're getting a better understanding of what this new virus can and can't do and how it works, but it will be some time before either immunizations are widely available or so many people have contracted it that we can claim herd immunity and not have to worry about contracting COVID-19. What felt at first like a temporary convenience is now becoming a part of our world moving forward. We will have to find ways to manage life with a new disease roaming the world. Of course, we are far from the first ones in history to struggle with these grim realities. There have been other diseases, other disasters. Have you seen this meme? People have not yet lost their sense of humor, at least. I've been thinking about the resources of our Christian faith and heritage in this time. How have God's people managed their difficult times before this? Christians in the 2nd and 3rd century were known for being among the people who went out and cared for the sick during 2 different plagues that are now assumed to be related to either smallpox or Ebola. As a result of their sacrificial care, they not only saved lives, but they also won many people over to their faith through their service to everyone in the name of loving their neighbors as themselves. By some accounts, the areas in which Christians lived at that time suffered half as many deaths from those plagues as other areas. Cyprian urged his people to consider the victims of those diseases as citizens of heaven and to put all their efforts into saving the living. These were the times that Christianity's presence exploded as people were so taken by the extravagant love and sacrifice Christians showed to their neighbors. We didn't do so well in the 14th century, but during a resurgence of the bubonic plague, Martin Luther in the 16th century also advocated for Christians to stay in their neighborhoods, continue to serve and to care for others during that time. He also notably advocated for good hygiene practices so that they could help prevent the spread of the disease, preventing further harm to their neighbors. Luther, in fact, lost his own daughter in the bubonic plague, but still wrote of it as a time when Christians were called to take up their cross and to be the hands and the feet of Christ to the world. I find those stories of how Christians shared love and concern for their neighbors inspiring. It makes me want to be like them. I find their attitudes contagious, even. But finding inspiration for keeping our minds, bodies, and spirits in condition to be able to live as compassionate, mindful, and purposeful people, I find in the pages of the New Testament from the Apostle Paul. Now, Paul did not live in a time of pandemic, although life could often be cruel in his time. But Paul did experience times of fear and struggle. He experienced imprisonment for his beliefs and sometimes wondered whether he would live to see the morning light. Some of you know that one of my favorite books of the Bible is Paul's letter to the Philippians. And although Paul writes that book or that letter while sitting in a Roman prison far from his friends, unsure of whether he will live or die there, it's still often described as the epistle of joy. I mean, Paul might be going through hard times, but he just exudes this joy and purpose and love for God and people that seem unshakable. What's more, his joy and his faith were contagious. He celebrated that his imprisonment was actually helping him spread the word about Jesus to the city he was in and to the people who heard about him. Over the next few weeks, we are going to focus on being contagious. Not the virus sort of contagious, but what was so contagious about Paul and so many Christians through history. As we're living in this time of contagion, I thought it might be helpful to think about how we can be spreading good news and reasons for hope today. So I'd like you to take a moment and imagine Paul sitting in a dark and lonely prison, waiting to learn if he will live or die. Imagine how vulnerable and scary that would feel. And then listen to these words that he wrote to his friends across the Mediterranean Sea. He wrote in Philippians chapter 1, verses 3 through 11. I thank my God every time I remember you. In all of my prayers for you, I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this, that the one who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. It is right for me to feel this way about all of you, since I have had you in my heart, and whether I am in chains or defending and confirming the gospel, all of you share in God's grace with me. God can testify how I long for all of you with the affection of Christ Jesus. And this is my prayer, that your love may abound more and more in the knowledge and depth of insight, so that you may be able to discern what is best and may be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ to the glory and praise of God. That doesn't sound to me like a man who is lost in thoughts of despair and hardship. He starts out with an outpouring of thanksgiving. I thank God every time I think of you, he writes. He's grateful for their friendship and partnership, how they've worked together side by side in sharing the gospel with the world. He's grateful for how they have been there for him in his own times of need. Have you known friends like that? People who just fill you with gratitude at the thought of them? I think of people I've gone on mission trips with, how friendships develop and deepen when you work side by side for a common purpose and you support and encourage one another along the way. There's a special bond between people who have worked together for something they both find deeply important and meaningful. And certainly for people who see one another through hard times too. I mean, when I think of all the people that have helped me through this year and the small and big ways that people have showed up to let me know that they cared and to even take a small burden off my shoulders, and I am filled with gratitude too. The Philippians had been there for Paul when he was in trouble, and he's grateful for their kindness to him personally as well. And also, you would think that his prayer life would be full of requests for God's help and God's mercy, prayers for strength and patience to face that day. But Paul's prayer in this moment has nothing to do with those things. With being saved from death or from suffering, he isn't praying over his trials. He's praying a prayer of gratitude for his friends and that their love and their goodness would just keep growing. A little further on, he even expressed gratitude that his imprisonment is helping spread news about Jesus around town as people gossip about him everywhere and say good things about him, bad things about him, whatever. As long as they're talking about him, he gives thanks that people are learning about Jesus. In fact, he even goes on to debate with himself at one point whether it would be better to live or die at that point. I mean, living, he could go on spreading the word about Jesus to people, but dying means he could actually be with Jesus. And he decides it would be better for him to die, but better for his friends if he lived. So he hopes to live. Is that amazing? I mean, I don't think that's what I would be thinking about if I were in that situation. He's thinking about all those things he's grateful for, all the things that bring him joy. He's focused on the good that is growing in the world, not just in spite of the bad things, but even because of the bad things. As I think about Paul sitting in a prison cell thinking about these things, I'm also mindful that we too have a choice about what we focus on in times when we're scared. or in danger. It reminds me of a quote from Mr. Rogers, who said that when he was a kid and he was watching the news with his parents and they would see something bad that was happening in the world, his mom would turn to him and say, "Look for the helpers." Anytime something bad has happened, you will always find people who are helping. There might be bad things happening in our world, but everywhere there are also people who are helping. There's always something to be thankful for. And that kind of attitude is inspiring. In fact, you might even call it contagious. Just thinking about how Paul is approaching this moment in his life makes me want to adjust my own attitude a bit too. I mean, he makes me want to be a more thankful person. I hope you find that catching as well. So here's what I'd like to invite you to do. Spend a few minutes right now making a list of things that you're thankful for. See how many things you can come up with. And then once you've done that, put that list somewhere where you'll see it and make just a little time each day for you to make a daily addition to that list based on what's happening in your life. Try to make it a daily habit to take time to be thankful for the good things in your life. I invite you to spend time this week cultivating that attitude of gratitude that makes your thankfulness contagious to others. In addition, I'd like to invite you, if you would like, to place a few things that you're thankful for in the comment section below this video. Once we have everybody's comments, we'll add that to a word wall that we're creating of things that everybody in the church has said they're thankful for. And we'll send out that image by email so that everyone can have it and have the opportunity to print it out and put it someplace in their home to remind them of things to be thankful for. Have a great week.